Greetings. Thank you for tuning into this 2020 General Election Candidate Forum for the Washington State Senate, District 22. This forum is presented by the League of Women Voters of Thurston County, along with Thurston Community Media, TCMedia, and is being held electronically due to COVID-19. Candidates, moderators, and timers are all joining in using Zoom links with the help of TCMedia. I'm Steve TILLEY from the League and will moderate this forum. A bit about the League. The League is a nonprofit organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in their government. The League neither supports nor opposes candidates or parties. We are nonpartisan. The League registers new voters, studies issues, and advocates for its positions with the legislature and other governmental bodies. Despite its name, the League is open to everyone over age 16. The candidates for this position are Garry, Holland, and Sam Hunt. For this forum, candidates will have the opportunity to answer a series of questions. Some of the questions have been contributed by the Asian Pacific Islanders Coalition South Puget Sound chapter. The first respondent will have 2 minutes for a response, followed by a 1-minute response from the other candidate. I'll alternate questions between the candidates, so each has a chance to answer first. Following the prepared questions, each candidate will have an opportunity to ask a question of the other with 1 minute for a response. There will be 1 minute for closing statements at the end. While you're responding, the timer will show you a sign when you have 30 seconds left, and then will show a stop sign when your time is up. If you can't see the signs, I'll tell you when your time is up. For the following questions, the first respondent will have 2 minutes. The second respondent will have 1 minute for their statement. First question, Sam Hunt, how will you work to increase the economic stability and opportunity for communities of color that have been disproportionately impacted by the health and economic impacts of COVID-19? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. And thank you to League of Women Voters and TCMedia for sponsoring this event. Certainly that's an issue that's been on our plate before us even more since recent events. And we are going to look at a number of things in the legislature this year. Senator Jamie Peterson, who chairs the Justice Committee, is working on a list of things such as banning chokeholds and doing some things in law enforcement. But it stretches beyond that. It goes to making sure that we have economic opportunities, which is going to be real difficult given a lot of small businesses are minority or Black or Asian owned, and trying to find a way for them to stay afloat is going to be very difficult. And without some assistance from the federal government, it's going to be even more difficult for the state to address that. But, quality schools is certainly one area to go to make sure that we address the needs of students of color in our schools. It's tantamount that we do that because education is the foundation for all. And if we have a quality education, it allows students to get a good education and enter into post-secondary education and into the workforce as productive citizens. So doing that and making sure that we have opportunities, that we have equal treatment in government as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Garry, Holland, how will you work to increase the economic stability and opportunity for communities of color that have been disproportionately impacted by the health and economic impacts of COVID-19? You have 1 minute.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters for having me on. I think a lot of the problems that face minority communities and businesses is regulation in our state. It prohibits the free expansion and establishment of businesses. I think removing regulations to free up entrepreneurs in those communities to create businesses that affect everybody in the state of Washington is a great way to increase the financial stability of families in our community. Right now, we have, under the governor's COVID rules, we have many businesses closing, which does not help our minority communities. The businesses all need to be opened, and we need to go to, older people need to take precautions. People who are immune deficient need to take precautions. But our businesses need to be open so they can flourish.
Thank you. Second question for Garry Holland. What is your stance on current legislation such as H.R. 7120, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act of 2020? Should Washington State consider adopting such legislation? You have 2 minutes.
I'm not familiar with that legislation. I've not heard of it. I understand the issue is that we have to make sure that everybody is treated well by the police. And so if we have a problem with certain officers, then they need to be removed from being law enforcement officers, or but mainly we're dealing with very good people, and they're putting all of their lives on the line to support us. So increase training budgets. Make sure we filter out people who shouldn't be law enforcement officers. But I'm in favor of increasing the budgets. It appears like places we need more officers, like in Olympia. It appears like we're unable to control the protests of breaking windows and tagging buildings. I think that we need to look at those type of issues. I mean, I know that there's a lot of issues about minorities in the police. Let's work on those issues. Make the police force a better place, a better police force. We can always improve. And I think that's what we need to do, is improve the product we have. And so as we spend time doing that, we can also, if we increase in funding, we can also add in other people into the law enforcement agencies who can deal with identified issues that don't require a police officer. I think we have that ability to do that, add in some extra staff to take care of some of those issues. Thank you.
Sam Hunt, what is your stance on current legislation such as H.R. 7120, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act of 2020?
Well, like Garry, that's a federal act, a federal bill, and I really haven't had time to look at, or haven't taken the time to look at it. But certainly we need to emphasize fairness in our law enforcement. And I think one of the misnomers that's going around are people saying we need to defund the police. We do not need to defund the police. We need to repurpose the police. We give them too many things to do. They should be law enforcement, not mental health counselors. Eugene, Oregon has a very good program where it has diversified its community service, where they have mental health professionals that go out and address problems rather than have the police do it, so police can work on law enforcement. And I would certainly do that. And, again, repurpose, not defund.
Thank you. Third question is for Sam Hunt. How can state revenue most appropriately be matched to state expenditure needs? You have 2 minutes.
Solve the problem in 2 minutes. Thank you. Our revenue system in this state is broken. It's outdated. It's a 19th century revenue system. And I have said for a number of years, if I had my druthers, we would revamp our tax system and make it more equitable, something more like Idaho has, an income tax, a reduced property tax, reduced sales tax. I would eliminate one of the biggest barriers to business success, especially small business, which is the B&O tax, and replace that with a corporate income tax, and deal with that at the same time, where we have a balance of taxing people who are at the top and taxing people who are at the bottom less. The top 1% pays very little in taxes, where a low-income family in this state pays something like 17% of its income in taxes. So we could balance that out and have a revenue system that really addresses the needs of our citizens. At the same time, hopefully we could look at school funding and continue to adjust that. I think having school funding based so heavily on a property tax in this state is an unfair or unlevel playing field, and we need to look at ways that we can continue to address school funding without depending upon a property tax. So those are a few things that I would look at.
Garry Holland, how can state revenue most appropriately be matched to state expenditure needs? You have 1 minute.
Well, I think there's plenty of revenue funds available for the state budget. I think one of our problems is our increased spending biennium over biennium. I think 6 years ago, 8 years ago, the state budget was $32 billion. Now we're up to $54 billion, I think the budget is this biennium. What we've run into is the buzzsaw of COVID-19 and shutting down all the businesses is revenue is going to now fall short, and we need to call in the legislature immediately to deal with the issue of the budget deficit and take care of these issues. There's other steps we can take. We can freeze all hiring in state service. We can stop all promotions and all pay increases. But there's things we can do right now to take care of it. There's plenty of revenue. We just are spending more than we're taking in at this point.
Fourth question, Garry Holland, what do you think are the most urgent priorities the legislature must address in 2021? You have 2 minutes.
The legislature coming in is the biggest problem they're going to face is the state budget, the one I just spoke about. We're about $9 billion over this fiscal year coming up and the next biennium short on revenue. And so there's only two ways to do it. We can increase revenue, we can increase taxes, or we can cut spending, or a combination of the two. And so the problem is that, are we going to increase taxes on the taxpayers in the state of Washington, or are we going to cut expenditures? So we can look at other things. I mean, there's other problems in state government with employment security. And so those type of things where there's $650 million they say was stolen by Nigerian whoever, and they're getting some of the money back. I think lax government controls over spending is part of the problem. I think there's other things too. We just went back to we started spending more money, like we're giving mothers on welfare part of the child support that comes in on their child support cases. We weren't doing it. We weren't doing it the last 2 years. We're not going to start doing it again. Those things give the $50 per month to mothers on public assistance, but it's a headache for the child support agency. There's a lot of different things we can do to address the situation, but really the legislature has to meet and fix this. Thank you.
Sam Hunt, what do you think are the most urgent priorities the legislature must address in 2021?
Well, I certainly think Garry hit the nail on the head in the first one. It's revenue and budget shortfall, and what has happened. When the legislature ended its session in March, the COVID thing was just really coming onto the radar, and we left a $3 billion surplus in the state budget, figuring that would be enough to address any major situation that would come along, not knowing what a tsunami of impact the COVID-19 would have. So we need to address revenue, as I said, and the shortfall. The other two areas, law and justice and healthcare. And certainly employment security is a problem. I want to point out that most of those are federal funds, and that was a national problem, not just a state problem. I'm not justifying it, but I'm saying it came fast and furious, and I think caught all the governments unaware.
Thank you. This concludes our prepared questions. Now you may each ask the other a question, and they will have 1 minute to respond. Garry Holland, what is your question?
I am obviously I'm opposed to the sex education law that was passed in the last legislative session. I would love to know the reason that Senator Hunt was in favor of that and voted in favor of that law, which sexualizes children starting at the age of 5.
Well, thank you. I think that's one of the most misrepresented pieces of legislation that we have passed. Certainly it's before us as referendum 90 on the ballot. I will vote to uphold the law. It does not sexualize kids at 5 or in kindergarten. It talks about social and emotional well-being. It is not a mandate for teaching various sex curricula. Those decisions are made by the local school boards, not by the state. And it merely takes what we did several years ago in making sex education, social emotional education, something that all schools should teach, and now this made it mandatory. That's really the only difference. We did not adopt a curriculum. We did not adopt anything that says we're going to teach grade school or kindergarten kids or younger kids, sexual positions and things like that. That's a total misrepresentation of what the law does.
Sam Hunt, what is your question for Garry Holland?
Well, thank you. I guess, Garry, you started out by talking about regulations, and that's something we hear a lot about. When you become senator, what regulations would you first want to change or do away with?
Well, I think I actually agree with you on the B&O taxes. I think eliminating B&O taxes on any company that grosses under $100,000 a year would be a benefit to especially startups for all companies out there. I think there's regulations that affect all the businesses in the state. I think requirements for employers to sometimes the building requirements, sometimes the commercial requirements on safety go beyond the mark and the need. But I think there's just a whole host of things that we need to take a look at, and what can we fix to improve the quality or the ability for minorities, for regular citizens of our state to establish businesses and create wealth for themselves and their families.
Now each candidate may give a 1-minute closing statement. Sam Hunt, your closing statement.
Well, thank you, and thank you again. And this is sort of unique. It's sort of like Hollywood Squares versus having a campaign and sitting down and getting to meet each other. All my conversation with candidates and constituents and stuff has been in these little yellow boxes since March, and I think we're all missing being out and actually getting to see each other and even shake hands maybe. But experience counts. Obviously, I've been in the legislature a long time. I was in the House for 16 years. I've been in the Senate for 4 years, and I want to put that experience to work. I'm on the Ways and Means Committee, the Education Committee, and I chair State Government, Tribal Relations, and Elections. And I want to put that work together, or keep doing that work, to make sure that we address what is really an unprecedented problem, and which will be a very unique legislative session this year and in coming years as we deal with the whole COVID issue, how we rework state government, education, et cetera. And I want to work on that. I've been asked to chair a task force to relook at how we do state government and offices and things. So that's part of what I want to do, is put that work experience to work.
Garry Holland, your closing statement.
Thanks. I have, it's been a fun time going out, and actually I've had a great time placing yard signs in people's yards and talking with people, even if we're standing at least 6 feet away from each other after I knock on their door. But it's been a lot more fun than I thought it would be running for this state Senate seat. I really enjoyed the time out. We actually started doing door-to-door stuff where we just place information on doors. We don't knock on them and talk to people. But I have, it's just a fascinating learning experience to run a campaign and to get involved and to meet the voters and the citizens of the 22nd Legislative District. I have had a great time. I'm meeting new people all the time, which is a lot of fun. I was very excited to get, I think I got 18,000 votes in the primary, which was more than I expected. And so that was very, very cool. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for this forum.
Thank you, candidates Garry Holland and Sam Hunt, for participating in this forum. We thank Thurston Community Media for producing this program, and the Asian Pacific Islanders Coalition in South Puget Sound for its contributions. This forum will be available on TCMedia channels, the League website, and YouTube. We're glad you've taken the opportunity to view this forum. We remind you to vote in the general election beginning October 16th and closing on November 3rd, 2020.